world when you choose Midwest Bank. I live on the go, and now I can bank on the go. With Midwest Bank, I have everything I need at my fingertips. I'm volleyball player Allie Batenhorst, and at Midwest Bank, you'll love banking here.
Liberty Law Group is committed to the pursuit of justice for those that have been injured. My name is Eric Hagan, attorney with Liberty Law Group. If you've been injured in an accident that wasn't your fault, call 877-42-LIBERTY. Our detail-oriented trial attorneys are committed to the highest quality legal representation. At Liberty Law Group, we will fight for you. Call 877-42-LIBERTY. Once again, that's 877-42-LIBERTY.
Golfing in 72 degrees and perfect conditions in Nebraska doesn't seem possible in the winter, but it is. Double Eagle Golf is your escape from the bone-chilling cold outside and a reason to keep your clubs out year-round. Book a bay with some friends for a weekend or come by for golf and happy hour on a weekday. Spring leagues begin in February. Get signed up today. That's all at Double Eagle Golf inside the Kinetic Sports Complex at West O Street. Online at doubleeagle.golf.
This is Lincoln's home for sports talk on the FM dial. Also online at theticketfm.com. On the internet, KNTK FM Firth, 93.7 The Ticket. Live from the heart of Lincoln, America, welcome to Ticket Weeknights on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, welcome back into Ticket Weeknights. Just going solo, filling until we get to about 7:15. Then we'll go ahead and throw it Nick Sanders away for some high school basketball. He will be on the call for that one. Obviously, no Jay Foreman with him there as he's down in Vegas, down there on Radio Row with the one and only Jake Sorensen of Early Break as they get content ahead of Super Bowl Sunday. But nonetheless, if you guys ever want to join in, we're going to be talking some Husker hoops. We'll also bleed into a little bit of NBA talk as well and kind of round out some of our power rankings. Because in particular, there is a team in the West that is incredibly scary right now, just by the fact that you have a bunch of players who are quote unquote past their prime that are playing some of the best basketball they've played in their entire career. And it's good offensively and it's really good defensively. So we're going to have to break that one down if we have time. But real quick, we'll just start off with Nebraska hoops. And again, streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and of course, Allo Channel 961. Great way to put a face to the voice if you choose to do so. But as I'm saying, we'll start with Husker hoops here. Obviously, if you're listening to me any of all last night, you kind of heard some of my frustrations with the reffing in that Big Ten road game versus Illinois. It was a tough loss. There's things Nebraska certainly could have done to prevent that game from falling into the ref's hands, but it is still by no means an excuse for what I think is poor officiating. And this is not a woe is Nebraska. Why does this always happen to Nebraska? This consistently happens to teams across Big Ten. It's just not consistent. And that's the frustrating part. It isn't a woe is Nebraska. Why does this always happen to us? Because sometimes it works in our favor and sometimes it doesn't. You think about that Michigan State game earlier in the season when we won at home, even though that wasn't a super close game. I thought in particular in that first half that Nebraska was getting a lot away with a lot of stuff. And then in the second half, the same things that Nebraska was doing, Michigan State started getting penalized. That's kind of what this Illinois game felt like. It felt like earlier in the game, you could argue Nebraska's not finding bodies. They're getting bullied on offensive rebounds. Fair enough. I can live with the fact that that's the way the refs are calling the game, and you're just not being physical. You're playing small ball, and the refs aren't going to cater to you. Just because you're playing small ball, they're not going to call these ticky-tack fouls. Cool. We can adjust to that. The problem is in the second half and overtime, it's like a complete switch of how you're going to officiate the game. Not only are you calling a ticky-tack foul on Sam Hoiberg, which was a great trap, that was a great steal, that could have led to points to go ahead and wrap that game up, you were calling a bunch of ticky-tack fouls when not only it was crucial with not a lot of time left, Illinois is also in the bonus. So you're taking away possessions and you're giving free points away. You have to make sure that if you are calling those, you have to stay consistent. You don't get to overtime and switch up the way you were calling the game previously in the first two halves. That's my frustration. This isn't woe is Nebraska. This is Big Ten fix the officiating consistency. And this is a why problem. This doesn't just start in college. You look at the NBA, you can argue the officiating in the NBA is even getting worse. There is a real lack of proper officiating. And maybe it's because we have so much footage and so much replay that we see it and it's more blatant than ever. Maybe it's always been this bad, but it just feels like, in particular, as of late, the officiating, it just seems like it's getting worse. In particular in the NBA, you hear it all the time. Adam Silver, you start the season off, we're going to start penalizing players for flopping and trying to sell these calls. You get a quarter way into the season and it all kind of goes to fruition. So that's my frustration with the Illinois loss. I don't think it's fair to say Nebraska should have won that game, but definitely the refs is just another factor that I thought you had to overcome. So with that out of the way, it was still a close game. I thought they played well. Outside of the offensive rebounds where they got severely outboarded, they played a pretty good game. The shooting numbers were fine. The turnover numbers were great. Free throw numbers, you were 100% from the free throw line. I can't count how many games that's caught Nebraska in previous years where through all 5 years of Fred Hoiberg, this is by far and away the best free throw shooting team he's had. And we've seen in years prior how much of a crux that could be for this Nebraska team. But they did well there, but it was still falling short. But now you got another opportunity. You got a road game versus Northwestern. You took care of those guys at home, and you're seeing this team still get severely penalized for not having any solid road wins. You look at a lot of teams who are ranked. You look at teams who got AP or coaches poll top 25 votes. Nebraska didn't get any. And you look at teams like Northwestern, they're getting votes. Obviously, Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois, they're getting votes. And then a few other random Big Ten teams. But Nebraska, you got a win against what was at the time number 1 Purdue. They're only number 2 now. One of their few losses, only 2 of their losses, one of them's Nebraska. So that's not getting accounted for. Yes, a bad loss to Creighton. You have a good road win against Kansas State, which, by the way, Kansas State was able to take down a top 10 Kansas team. So you think that would look good on our resume, but it just isn't enough. There is something severely being looked at in terms of this team not being able to win on the road. So as much as I'd love to say that if these guys take care of business, they're a lock, it's sitting right now between 8 and 9. So I think as long as you play out these games, win everything at home, which again, you can't really bank on, especially way some of these games have been close as they have. But you got some tough road games in Northwestern. And then, of course, you got one at Indiana and Ohio State. But other than that, you look at Rutgers, you got those guys at home. You got Minnesota at home. You got Michigan at home. And then Michigan to end the year on the road. It's a manageable schedule. They really just can't let it slip. But if they want to get some respectability, I think if you really want to solidify yourself as a tournament team, I think the road wins is what's really preventing Nebraska from getting votes in that top 25 and just feeling like a solid lock for the dance. Right now, they're sitting anywhere between 8 to 10 is kind of the norm for this Husker Hoops team, which, by the way, is still much better than I think most people would have anticipated. But they do need to get that road win. And it shows up again and again and again. It's definitely the one thing out of Nebraska's resume that's penalizing them because they got the big wins. They got a fantastic home record. Conference play has been good enough that you certainly should get in. It's just the road wins. That is the one thing holding Nebraska back. And again, that's why that Illinois game was tough because it was that close. And you don't ever want to put a game on the refs, but certainly at times it felt like it was leaning that way. So that's a loss right there. Illinois jumps up quite a bit. They're now number 10. And Nebraska, despite it being a close loss, really doesn't gain. In fact, loses a little bit of ground as well. With that being said, though, we'll go ahead and switch it over to NBA as we only got about 5 minutes left here before we go ahead and throw it to a break, and we'll connect you to some high school hoops. I want to go through this NBA power rankings a little bit, in particular the West, because I think when you look at the East, the biggest surprise would be the Cleveland Cavaliers, but you're not surprised with the Celtics. You're not surprised with the Bucks. The Pacers certainly cooled off. You can remember earlier in the season, it was, let's have this offensive experiment with Tyrese Halliburton, and certainly at times it works really well, but they're giving it up on defense. The whole offense seems to be predicated on quick shots. If you look at the tape, they're okay with giving away shots at the rim. They trust Miles Turner to rotate, contest at the rim, just so they can get a quick rebound and go off and running again. So the Pacers, they do slip, but still sitting strong at number 6. And then the Miami Heat, although a bit of a slow start, 26 and 24, they sit at the 8th seed. So again, the East, I don't think there's nothing too surprising there outside of the Cleveland Cavaliers with a good 32 and 16 record. But the West is what I want to talk about. The Thunder being number 1, certainly a young team that's surprising people. 35 and 15. Timberwolves another really good start to the season. You still get worried about Rudy Gobert, in particular in the fourth quarter, because it isn't one of those things that you can just scoff about. The Timberwolves do have some serious fourth quarter woes. They get outscored quite a bit in fourth quarters. If they don't build that really solid cushion, you've seen this team struggle to close out games. And I do think part of that is, as great as Rudy Gobert has been this season, what he's able to do defensively in the paint, just be one of the best deterrents of anybody in the league right now, outside of, you can argue a few, but Rudy Gobert is certainly on that Mount Rushmore of best paint defenders. But when it gets to the fourth quarter, that problem hasn't entirely gone away. That it does get clogged. With Rudy Gobert in the center of that paint, obviously you can't stretch him out to the wing. He has no 3-point shot. You don't ever want him taking that shot. He's simply there for defense. And in the fourth quarter, when things get tight, you do see the Timberwolves struggle. But they're still sitting strong at number 2. The reason I want to talk about the West, the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard is secretly having one of his best seasons at the age of 32. He is not only doing well offensively, he is doing incredibly. He is shooting the ball right now at 45% from 3. An insane clip from Kawhi Leonard, a guy who's 32. Honestly, if you look at Kawhi Leonard and DeMar DeRozan's arc, they're very similar. You know, DeMar DeRozan, although he didn't have quite as many, whatever you want to call it, load management games, rest seasons, he was more consistent. But DeMar DeRozan peaked at the age of 32. Not just, IQ wise, but his shot selection, his field goal percentage, everything was up, up, and up. Kawhi Leonard offensively is an absolute terror right now. And also, James Harden has been playing some of the best basketball of his career. Despite all the trades, all the drama around him, he's really having a resurgence. And you still got Paul George. You got a lot of lineups. If you want to play big, Zubac is still a great center. He's not going to be your Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic, but a cheaper center that you can play solid minutes, and just gives you what you need. Good rebounding and good rim protection, and doesn't get into a whole lot of foul trouble. Or they can switch it up and play small ball. They got enough really elite ball handlers and playmakers to where they have multiple starting 5 lineups, to where this is why the team gets scary. Because I think when you get into the playoffs, having that flexibility in your lineups where you can go small or you can go big, and you have Kawhi Leonard having one of his best seasons, not just in recent years, throughout his entire career. And defensively, he deserves credit for that too, because as I'm talking about Kawhi Leonard and this resurgence of a year he's having despite his age, defensively, it's what's been impressive. He has significantly stepped up on the defensive end of the court, and it just takes watching 1 or 2 games before you notice that difference. He is really having what is an all-out season, and that's why the Clippers really had that resurgence. A 9-1 in their last 10 games. They're sitting there at 34-15, only half a game behind for first place in the Western Conference. Denver Nuggets still sitting at 4, Sacramento Kings at 5, the Suns at 6, Pelicans at 7, and the Mavericks at 8. And this is again where the West gets interesting, because you are at a point now where some of these teams, like we saw in last season, they might want to tank to avoid what would be a 6-seeded Suns, what would be an 8th-seeded Mavericks. If you're the Thunder, would you rather play the New Orleans Pelicans or the Dallas Mavericks? If I'm the Thunder and I'm at the 1 seed, I would much rather play the New Orleans Pelicans every single time. I do not want to see Luka in the playoffs. You can ask Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant and company how that felt going up against Luka in a game 7. Despite being at home, they got blown out, and it wasn't close. It was over by the third quarter. Luka Doncic in the playoffs is a different guy, and he's still got plenty of help there as well. So that's the team you want to avoid. So as we're kind of getting closer to All-Star break in the playoffs, you're going to see some of these teams, despite having a high seed, tank a little bit. I think the Thunder or the Timberwolves or the Clippers, they would be okay with losing some games, because if you're the Nuggets right now, you're the 4th-seeded Nuggets, you feel pretty good about playing the 5th-seeded Kings. You don't have to play the Mavericks. You wouldn't have to play the Suns. You would really be looking at the Sacramento Kings. That seems a lot better than any of those other options outside of maybe the Pelicans at that 7th seed. So that is one thing to look at with these playoffs, especially the way it's been seen in years prior. You will see some of these higher seeded teams go ahead and tank and lose that 1st seed just so they can go ahead and beat up on what would be a Pelicans team that has been up and down, not a lot of consistency, little playoff experience. You're still waiting for Zion, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, one of those guys. They're dying, become that star, become that guy of the team. And although things are clicking a little bit this year, you would still expect this many years in with Zion Williamson. 29 and 21 isn't the expectation you would have, especially if you go make these trades and you go get yourself, a Brandon Ingram, you go get yourself a CJ McCollum, you got yourself Lonzo Ball, and then bad move, in my opinion, you traded him away for little to nothing. But other than that, you've been pretty pleased with David Griffin and his ability to add talent, but it just hasn't been working. So with the Pelicans, I think if you're the Sacramento Kings or if you're Timberwolves, Clippers, any of those high-seeded teams, why wouldn't you tank just so you can rather be the 4 seed and play the Sacramento Kings? You still get the home advantage. You get to play the Kings at home. I suppose if you're the Thunder and the 1 seed, you got to go up against Luka Doncic and the Mavericks. That's a much better roster that you would want to face in the Sacramento Kings, just because I think that argument is true, where you do want to have some of that playoff experience. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and kind of wrap it up here. Just some quick thoughts on the NBA as we're getting closer to All-Star break, and some other news too. I would pay attention to the All-Star break this year. I know it has been the most exciting thing as All-Stars have become, not just in the NBA. We had the NFL flag football event, the NHL skills competition, the All-Star games, despite when any pro organization, they tend to be lacking. But what Adam Silver is doing this year could actually add some excitement. They got the LED floors. So basically the whole court will be able to light up. They'll be able to put whatever graphics they want. They want to put special effects on the players as they're running down the court. Feel free to do so. Cool effects. It's just basically make it a light show. You go to a concert, everyone's been to concerts where you add a bunch of lights, you add a bunch of lasers, smoke, all that. It just creates a much more fun, enjoyable viewing experience. And I think that's what they're trying to do here, because in terms of competition, it's been proven it's incredibly hard to get the guys to compete at a high level. So with this, at the very least, add some more entertainment value. It'll be something to watch, see if it works for him. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here as we got high school hoops up next. We'll have Nick Sainert on the call for that one, as always. So don't go anywhere. Plenty left to hear on Ticket Weeknights.